celebrating 15 years of possibility. Pilot Flying J and Halloran Hilton Hill present Anything is Possible. Today's guest, John Currie.
This is Anything is Possible. I'm Halloran Hilton Hill. And of course, these are great stories about great people whose lives prove that anything is possible. This is John Currie. He's the new athletic director at the University of Tennessee. Welcome home.
Thanks, Halloran. It's great to be here. It's an honor.
Did you think you would ever hear that? Athletic director at the University of Tennessee.
You know, candidly, that was always a dream, but is one that there's no real logical path to get there. And so when I got the call to have the opportunity to visit with Chancellor Davenport about 2 months ago, it was a real thrill.
Let's go back to the beginning of your life. Where'd you grow up?
So I grew up in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, so a college town, and around college athletes and the environment and the energy that goes along with a town and gown situation. Why
aren't you at UNC? I mean, typically when people grow up there, they have to make a decision, first of all, well, you got a bunch of teams right in that area, but you have to decide you're going to be something that is native to North Carolina.
Right.
How did you escape that?
Well, I grew up as a Carolina fan. Both my parents went to the university and University of North Carolina and had settled back there even though they had been away. And as a little kid, my father would come home from work and pick me up, and we'd drive over usually a little bit late and go to Carmichael Auditorium and watch people like Michael Jordan and Phil Ford and those kind of great historic athletes at the University of North Carolina. Graduated from high school at Chapel Hill Senior High School back when there was only one, now there's three, and went off to Wake Forest. And I had a bunch of friends that stayed in town and went to Carolina, but I really looked forward to the opportunity to experience some new things.
Do something different. All right. You have siblings?
I have 4 siblings total. My father and my mother had 2, myself and my sister Lauren, and then my father was remarried, and I have 3 younger siblings.
So as you were growing up, I know you were a history major in college. What was your initial aspiration?
I wanted to be a high school history teacher. And when I went to college, I thought I would be a high school history teacher and maybe a baseball coach.
Were you an athlete?
I was a baseball athlete in high school growing up. Of course, I got the Best Hustle Award, and my son Jack saw the trophy one time, and he said, Dad, if you got the Best Hustle Award, that means you weren't any good, right? But I kind of took offense to that. I thought that was an important award to have. But I played baseball and soccer primarily, and a little bit, everybody in Chapel Hill played basketball and stuff like that. And I loved history, and I had great social studies teachers at Chapel Hill High School that some of which I still see around, like Fred Kiger, who's been involved in a lot of different things through the years.
So did you have an experience with a teacher that led you to want to become a teacher, or did history connect you to who you were by way of your family? Because when we were talking before we came on the air, you told me a great story about your grandfather.
So my grandfather went ashore on Utah Beach at 6:30 in the morning on D-Day on June 6, 1944. And so as a little kid, I was cognizant of that and really got interested in World War II history right away. And as an elementary school student, I read all the books about World War II that were in that elementary school library.
Do you think you were doing that, though, to connect with him, or was that what you really wanted?
It just became a spark. I was into it, and those were great stories, and stories like Guadalcanal Diary and some of the Battle of Midway and things like that. Those were great stories.
So you're on this path. You believe you want to be a history teacher, and that's not quite the way it played out.
I was really lucky in terms of going to college and having a very good experience at Wake Forest. And my father had really said, well, just study what you love, right? I'm not sure I would give completely the same advice now, because now I believe that students need to be very intentional at some point in that college career about a career and about what they're going to do after school. And I think that's one of the responsibilities that higher education has slowly in some cases, or rapidly in others, evolved to, that we need to be more intentional. But in my case, I really had no clue what I wanted to do. My dad told me to just study what I was interested in, studied history, and I did a lot of other things aside from just study around. But when I got into my junior year, I had done some practicums and gone to some schools and done some short practicums, kind of immersion type opportunities. I had to make a decision though, and the decision, to be very candid, was if I was going to student teach as a senior, that meant I had to get up at like 5 a.m. I was decal social chairman. That wasn't happening. I wasn't getting up at 5 a.m. I knew that was not the path for success for me. So I decided that I would defer that dream and see where I ended up.
This is John Currie, UT's athletic director. Don't call him before 5. This is Anything is Possible.
Possibility powered by Pilot Flying J, Covenant Health, Home Federal, and the Knoxville News Sentinel. Coming up.
I can remember very few letters from my dad, but my dad's letter said, you don't have to do anything specific, but you do have to do something.
You might be looking at one of the greatest history teachers in America if the student teaching had just started 2 hours later. Dadgummit.
You got to know your strengths and weaknesses at different times in your life. I get up early now. It would have worked now, but back as a senior in college, that was not the right thing for me. So
you decide not to do that, so you have a direction shift. Where do you end up going, and what do you end up doing?
So true story, in September of my senior year, my father had written me a letter. I still have it. It was about 5 or 6 pages, an old-fashioned letter. It wasn't an email. We didn't have that back then. It was an old-fashioned handwritten letter. And I can remember very few letters from my dad. But my dad's letter said, you don't have to do anything specific, but you do have to do something. And you have to be intentional about doing something after you finish. And I still didn't know what that was. And lo and behold, I was sitting around the house where I lived, and one of our fraternity brothers walked in the door, and he had a suit on. And we assumed that he must have been in court or something like that. And we were like, what are you doing, man? And he said, guys, we got to get jobs. I've been at Career Services. And we all kind of looked at ourselves and said, this guy's a goof off. If he's getting a job, we better think about getting jobs too. So it was a great example of positive peer pressure.
Right.
Inspiring all of us to start working on that. So I started going and interviewing at the Career Services office and dropping my resume into the envelopes like they used to do in the old days. I guess now they probably do it all online. And after a little while, I got in a pattern. I'd go to these interviews, and I'm sure I was the guy that when the recruiters went back to the hotel and were having a drink after the day, I'm sure I was the guy they were making fun of, because I had no idea. I hadn't taken any business classes or anything like that. But later on that year, I was on a student government committee, and I met the new athletics director at Wake Forest, whose name is Ron Wellman, who is still there today. And I was on the student government committee, and I connected with him, and he invited me to come by, and ended up in an internship in athletics.
So when you start working with and under him, was it what you learned being around him that made you go, here it is, this is the path?
Well, it's interesting that the job I had, I was Deacon Club intern, right? $828 a month. I thought I had all the money in the world. It was incredible. Deacon Club intern, and I worked for really good people in that development aspect of the department. And it wasn't a very big athletic department.
Right.
And I didn't see the athletics director that regularly. But something happened that was really important to me that helped make me and kind of set my ethical foundation. And I look back and I see people out there that didn't have the same blessing that I did about being around people with extremely high integrity right away. And that is, we had to sign our complimentary ticket form. So I'm 22 years old, I get complimentary football tickets for the first time ever, and you go down and you sign this form, and it says, I will not give my tickets away to anybody in any circumstance. I will never sell them. I will never give them to somebody who might otherwise buy a ticket. And it was just locked in. That's how you treat that particular aspect of the benefits that come with being in athletics, right? And there's so many places and so many other people who have gotten in trouble with that kind of thing. And it's an example, a very small example about how Ron's ethical compass became mine.
So you're there, but that doesn't bring you here. What happened after that?
So I worked there for 4 years in development, eventually came here for about 1.5 years, then went back to Wake Forest for 2 years, and then I got the call back in 2000, the summer of 2000, to come help raise money for some of the facilities we were going to do at Tennessee other than just football. So we were going to build a new aquatic center and soccer stadium, Olympic sports, trying to enhance our facilities for all of our sports. And I came back for that. Interestingly, what I get a lot of times from young people, from students, hey, Mr. Currie, I want to be an athletics director. How do I become an athletics director? The reality of it is, when I was 22 or 23 years old, the idea of being Ron Wellman or Doug Dickey or Mike Hamilton or Joan Cronin was unfathomable to me. I couldn't identify with that. That was so far away from where I was. All I wanted to be was assistant director of the Deacon Club when I was Deacon Club intern. All I wanted was make that next step. And what I realized over time, over about 10 years, is in this business, in athletics, you've got to become an expert in something before you earn enough credibility to really get an opportunity to advance. And I was very fortunate to do that under great mentors.
So what was the one thing where you found a level of expertise that started to accelerate your progress?
It was really about fundraising and relationship building. And
What did you learn from that? Because that's the thing, a lot of people go, that's the last thing I want to do is raise money.
Right, right. Well, fundraising and raising money is really about relationships and about learning to listen to people. There's one of those old sayings is introverts make the best salespeople. Why? Because they listen. And learning about what's important to people, about projects, learning the inside of your operation so you can tell the story to people that can change lives through their gifts. There's so many people that find what we talk about sometimes is helping donors find their passion, whether it's the School of Business or art or music or athletics or whatever it is. And doing that, you do that by spending time with people and listening to them and developing trust.
So you're here, you help raise money, but are you on a path to becoming an athletic director? And at that point, had you gone, hey, I'd like to do that one day?
So it was probably 7 or 8 years into that run that I realized that, I think I could do that, right? And I'd like to do that. Now, athletic director jobs are hard to get. There's a lot of circumstance. There's not that many of them. You think about it, there's 65 Power 5 ADs, there's 100 U.S. senators. So these are hard jobs to get. One time I had a mentor, I was thinking about a career outside of athletics at one point, and he said, just remember, John, there's at the time 125 football bowl series, FBS, Division I football AD jobs. He said there's 25 you can't get, and there's 75 you don't want. So you're competing with all these people for this narrow group of jobs that may or may not come open at a time that's convenient for you.
What even made you, though, believe it was possible?
It was really working with great people, man. People like Joan Cronin and Mike Hamilton and Doug Dickey, working with great coaches along the way, and seeing that I could impact student-athlete lives by understanding how the enterprise works.
Kansas State. You smile when you think of Kansas State because that's where it starts to really unfold. What happened there and how'd you get there?
So I was hired at Kansas State in 2009 by Kirk Schultz. He was a brand new president there. He had come to K-State from Mississippi State, and he hired me. I was his first hire, and we had a great run. We inherited a lot of problems. We had there were some secret contracts, lawsuits, a real loss of trust between a lot of the constituencies of the university and the athletics program. So we had to get right about rebuilding relationships and rebuilding trust right away, which we really took a very a transparent attitude towards that. And we're very open in how we shared financials about contracts and how we go about generating revenue, because we had to get our investors, if you will, to buy into what we were going to do.
Makes sense if a Wall Street or if a publicly traded firm files their 10Ks and their AQs and whatever it is, and there's that transparency where you can see earnings, you can see where everything is. You kind of took that approach because I was looking at a piece that you had prepared, and all the financial data is there, and I'm like, who does this? Yeah.
Well, we'll do it at the University of Tennessee, and we're working right now on some of the same kind of financial transparency models that we did at Kansas State. One of the things we have to remember in intercollegiate athletics, even with the television money explosion of the last 10 or 15 years, half of the revenue at the University of Tennessee in athletics, half of the revenue does not come from television contracts. It does not come from Nike. It does not come from major media contracts. Half the revenue, we have about $140 million of revenue at the University of Tennessee, half the revenue comes in the form of ticket sales and annual contributions. And the people that buy our tickets and make those annual contributions, guess what? They can quit doing that anytime they want to, and they don't have to tell us why. So I believe that part of the trust that we have to have with the people that are making happen these opportunities for the young people that wear orange and white at the University of Tennessee is being accountable, and so that they can see when you have someone out there in the community that's working a second job so they can have enough money to buy their football tickets or buy their Lady Vol basketball tickets or whatever it may be, so they can see that the money that they're sharing with us is being well managed and well utilized to provide opportunities for young people.
John Currie is the new athletics director at the University of Tennessee. When we come back, I want to talk about winning. This is Anything is Possible.
Coming up,
One of the questions we have to ask when someone says, hey, let's do this, one of the questions we ask is, will that help us win?
Welcome back to Anything is Possible. John Currie is my guest. John Currie, the man, what kind of guy are you? Tell me about your family. Tell me about your faith, if you speak about that. Who are you?
Well, I'm very blessed, and I'm Presbyterian, and so I feel like the things that I've been led to have been inspired. My wife, Mary Lawrence, and I have been married almost 18 years this year, June 27th. We have 3 children. We have a 16-year-old son, Jack, a 14-year-old daughter, Gigi, and an 8-year-old daughter, Mary Dell.
I know that you love your family, and I know that you love UT football. I guess we need to talk about winning, and how do you set an organization and a culture up to winning, for winning? Because as an athletic director, you'll get all the blame, very little of the credit, and you're in this world that's up here, and if you're not winning, you're sinning. So when you come in and you have a set of core values, and you're trying to drive the enterprise or organization by values, that's great on paper. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, you got to win. You got to win, right?
Absolutely. And you mentioned winning in football. At the University of Tennessee, we have an expectation and a goal of winning in all of our sports, and we have, and we've won national championships at the University of Tennessee in multiple sports. Certainly, we are part of the educational enterprise, and we have to remember that our student athletes are not just competing on the fields and the courts, but they're working on their degrees. One of the reasons they're eligible for that bowl game and eligible to get in that gift suite and get a lounge chair or a television set is they've achieved some academic goals along with their athletic goals, and they've passed their classes, and they're making progress towards their degrees, which is the first reason that we're here and that we do this. Winning is very important, though, and as we talk about student athlete experience, I've never done, or I should say it in a different way. Almost always when we do student athlete in-person exit interviews, which we do with every student athlete, the student athletes who have won, usually that's a high element of how they viewed their athletic experience. In other words, usually they look back as it being a great experience more if they won.
Our show is called Anything is Possible, and I've been a student of possibility for years. And I guess the one central truth I've learned is nothing's possible until you believe.
Right.
Right? So as the athletic director across several sports, the first thing you have to be is believer in chief. Mm-hmm. And people can sniff out a phony just like that. Mm-hmm. But if you do believe, and you've primed the organization in terms of culture and process and performance, once people kind of buy in, it kind of goes. That's your job to communicate and push that through the organization. So I would imagine you have to keep that alive in yourself, mm-hmm. but then you have to transmit or emit that. Right. How do you do that?
Well, one of the things that we need to do is when we're and one of the challenges when you're a major, Tennessee's a super land grant, the land grant and the flagship institution of the state. There are a lot of people that are invested and a lot of things people want to do and causes that people have. And we have to make sure we stay focused to the mission, both academically and athletically. And one of the questions we have to ask when someone says, hey, let's do this, one of the questions we ask is, will that help us win, right? Now, that doesn't mean we're winning at all costs, but is there something we're doing, an activity that we're doing, or something that we used to do that's just no longer as important from a resource or a time allocation as it once was? And that's one of the things that I'll ask is will it help us win? Because we all, hey, let's try this, or let's try that. Will it help us win? And we'll ask that question. ADs, as one of my mentors told me one time, ADs are never celebrated, they're only tolerated, because the focus should always be, for the successes, should be on our student athletes and our coaches. Another challenge that we have right now in this day and age is the same challenge we have with our kids. How do we build toughness and resiliency in an era where we're providing more benefits and a better quality of experience than ever before in our history. So you think about student-athlete experience, and we do more to benefit student-athletes. We've improved that experience every year that I've been doing this, 24 years, right? If you look where we are right now versus where we were 24 years ago from a safety standpoint, concussion awareness, sickle cell testing, nutrition, mental health, all those things, we're doing better than we've ever done it before. We're providing a bigger stipend, we're providing more cost of living allowances, we're providing better travel, all those type things. Well, in doing all that stuff, how do we develop toughness and resiliency, right, when so much is given and provided to our young people?
I think probably the great challenge there is the way we show up in the world in front of them, right? When they see us power through. And I know that you have a lot of opportunities and challenges in front of you, but just my sense of you is that, you know, your grandfather, you know, bequeathed to you through DNA a kind of joyful toughness that says, we're going to win, and we're going to do it the right way.
You know, my grandfather was a pretty conservative guy, like a lot of that generation, but my mother told me one time is my grandfather never minded paying his taxes. He never minded paying his taxes. He didn't want to pay more than his taxes and his fair share, but he never minded paying his taxes because he remembered in World War II that his army, the United States of America Army, was the best fed and best supplied and best supported of any army in the world.
And that's what we got to do here.
And that's what we got to do here.
John Currie, all the best to you. Go Big Orange. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, Howard.
We'll see you next time on Anything is Possible.